everybody works.
Yes.
Oh, so then there is a place for theology. The floor is yours.
Well, I'm mainly here for Dražen Glavaš, who died suddenly, as most of you know, in the beginning of December. We were just with Jody and her boys on Sunday, and they're doing well, considering everything. God is taking care of her needs for this first initial year, and so she has time to consider what God has next for them. But please, you can pray for them, pray for them. It's been tough with the transition. They were out of school for several weeks after Dražen's death, and so they're in high school and moving towards high school. Those are just a really transitional period of life for them, so please remember them and the boys in prayer. Dražen showed that it's possible to bridge worlds. He taught at a private business university in Zagreb. He led a marketplace ministry. He recently completed a D-Min in faith and work. And I think one of the things he showed is that ministry leaders, educators, pastors have an ability to move laterally between the theological world we're most familiar with and other areas of influence in society. There's so many stories you can tell about crazy situations Dražen would end up in, being able to talk to people from his perspective as a Christian. And he did a lot of research on this. You have coffee with anybody in Croatia, the same topics come up over and over and over again. And his research concluded that some of the main things underlying that would be a systemic problem of corruption in Croatia, an organizational, interpersonal problem of ineffective leadership, and on a personal level, a negative attitude in general towards work that is linked to nepotism, laziness, and a lack of responsibility. So those were his main conclusions from his doctoral research. And they're rarely addressed in church. There's a great need to teach pastors how to speak of a theology of work, to teach people how to think about their work and the culture that they're in, and prepare leaders to engage their culture transformatively. And he saw a strong need for a contextualized Croatian theology of work. Well, why contextualized? Well, most of them, it's only been in recent decades that there is material about a theology of work, but most of it comes from Britain, North America, or Germany, and those are societies with a long, long history of some kind of biblical influence on the way that people looked at their work. And so they tend to assume certain things that cannot necessarily be assumed when you are in other contexts. So there's something we find that's missing. It's very attractive to people. It works really well. You can put it out into society, and people of maybe no spiritual interest will come to maybe virtue-based trainings, those kinds of things. It's exciting, it's interesting to people, and we notice a lot of change in people, but we also notice they may completely be unchanged in certain areas that have to do with, say, corruption or the way that they actually handle their work lives. It's been an interesting mix, the experience in recent years. Briefly on those programs we've been doing, Dražen led the John Maxwell Equip material in Zagreb. That lasted for about 6 or 7 years. Just one short note, we sense that in Croatia, the delivery format of doing a weekend twice a year, generally like April and October, actually worked really well. It's always a killer in Croatia to try and get weekly things to actually function long term, and yet people were willing to kind of make the big effort to push and have a weekend twice a year, and there was a lot of bonding that went on with that. Dražen would see people around tables. There was one wedding that came out of that, so that was kind of a big deal.
No babies yet.
No babies yet, they're working on it. The Global Leadership Summit is more of a big kind of showy thing that we do. The attendance last year was 800 people in 2 cities in Croatia. And again, those are very few of the attendees are evangelical Christians. It's mostly people from the marketplace, renewable, charismatic-oriented Catholics. So it has a great access. The names of these authors and materials have a way of pulling people in. But we, on the deeper level, longer term, what Dražen, where he was at the time of his death, was saying, well, how do we actually go deeper than that to overturn and look under the underside of things and figure out what is really lacking? So a couple ideas upon where maybe that was going and needs to go. Contextualized Croatian theology of work would have to take into account social, rhetorical, cultural hermeneutics, things like Hofstede's model of different cultural values, presence in different cultures, because you see such strong differences from one place to another in terms of how people relate their lives and their work to the society they live in and what their values are on. even talking about this, I think, is highly sensitive. I've lived here long enough that I have cringed every time someone has said, "Welcome to our Balkan consultation," because I live in Croatia, and Croatians do not like at all being told that they are in the Balkans. So the cultural locations of our countries, where we are, who we are, I think Macedonians have done a better job. When I talk to Macedonians, they seem more like at peace with who they are somehow. Croats are not. So talking about what are the true habits of the heart of people in Croatia is not an easy conversation. It's not. It's one that people are kind of having all the time, but not really in an integrative or constructive fashion. Another one would be, looking in recent decades, research on cultural values present strongly in the New Testament, like patronage, kinship, honor, and shame, has been a major topic in physiology and in theology. And we are located in a Mediterranean context where I think still today, patronage, kinship, honor, and shame are extremely important values. And yet we don't have the resources to really directly engage those things, and we don't invite young people or older people, anybody, to mine their lifetime of experiences. I taught a guy hermeneutics who grew up shepherding in Albania, and I just thought, this is crazy. Like, you have direct cultural access to things that, Western theologians read books to try and imagine what it's like to be a shepherd, and here you did as a child. Yeah, and another one would just be, what does good leadership look like in our cultures? A good leader is a culturally embedded phenomenon. What is a great Croatian, sensitive, thoughtful, but passionate leader look like? Is not an easily answered question, I think, in many ways. So Dražen, what he really dreamed about was culture building. So I have a couple seconds left, I'll end with this. How could Croatia be different in 20 years if, say, 10 young evangelicals were well-trained and well-formed to enter crucial areas of society like journalism, politics, the media? These would be people who would finish secular degrees but have strong biblical formation, a grid to go out into a world that they don't yet understand, and live as a Christian in it and influence society. And that's kind of where things stopped at the time of his death, was figuring out how institutions like those here could participate in that kind of a process of forming young people.
Thank you.